Welcome to the first part of Chapter 9, The Invention of Photography. Making pictorial images and preparing printing plates to reproduce them remained handwork processes until the arrival of photography. A series of inventions through the 19th century brought the creation and reproduction of images into the machine age. But first we're going to start with the camera obscura. The concept behind this device used for making images by photomechanical processes was known in the ancient world as early as the time of Aristotle in the 4th century BC. It is called a camera obscura, or dark chamber in Latin. Artists have used the camera obscura as an aid for drawing for centuries. Around 1665, small portable box-like camera obscuras were developed. The only thing needed was a way to fix or make permanent the image projected into the camera obscura by a light-sensitive material capable of capturing the image. Early inventors of photography used their camera obscuras as the basis for their experimentation. So you need to make sure you understand how does a camera obscura work. Let's start with the very first picture ever known taken. It was taken by a man named Joseph Niepce, and it was a scene from a window that he produced in 1826. Well, Joseph's son was drafted into the army, so he had to find another way to make images as he was a very poor reproduction artist. So he began in 1822 by coating a pewter sheet with a light-sensitive asphalt called bitumen of Judea. He put one of his pewter plates in the back of his camera obscura and pointed out the window, and this is the earliest known photograph to this day. After leaving it all day to develop, he removed it and washed it with lavender oil, and this is the result. Another man who was doing similar research at the time, Louis-Jacques Daguerre, contacted him. And Joseph Niepce and Louis Daguerre collaborated or shared ideas until Niepce's death in 1833. Louis-Jacques Daguerre continued this work and in 1839 perfected the process. He presented these to the French Academy of Sciences, and the members marveled at the detail. His prints were called daguerreotype prints. So you need to be able to research and tell me what are the characteristics of daguerreotype prints. Further developments were made at the same time by an Englishman named William Henry Fox Talbot, and he pioneered a process that formed both the basis for modern photography and photographic printing plates. This process came from his frustration with his lack of drawing ability. So you need to tell me, how is a photogenic drawing made? Eventually, he let his research drop, having satisfied his curiosity, until he learned about the research of Daguerre. Then he ran off to London to prepare a report on what he did, not to be outdone by Daguerre, and presented it to the Royal Society also. Now, Sir John Herschel was an astronomer and a chemist, and he learned of the problems that were facing Daguerre and Talbot, and he set out to help them find a solution. He was the first to use sodium thiosulfate to fix an image by halting the action of light. He shared this knowledge with Talbot, who adopted the process for fixing an image. Now, during that same month, Talbot solved the problem of the reversed image by contact printing his reversed image to another sheet of sensitized paper in sunlight. Herschel named the image a negative, so this is where we get our negative and positive, as you can see from our drawings here. So, you need to tell me what was Herschel's contribution to photography, and what further contributions did Talbot make to photography. Herschel later named Talbot's invention photography, from the Greek photographos, meaning light drawing. Late in 1840, Talbot achieved a further breakthrough and was able to increase the light sensitivity of his paper, expose a latent image, and then develop it after it was removed from the camera. Initially, he called his invention a calotype, but later changed it to Talbotype. In 1844, this is his magnum opus, so to speak, he began to publish the Pencil of Nature in installments, with each of the 24 photos mounted by hand. Each picture was presented opposite text, which explained the picture and gave new uses for this new medium. This was a milestone in the history of books. So you need to be able to tell me what is a calotype's characteristics, and then I want you to be able to contrast the characteristics of a calotype with a daguerreotype. George Eastman eventually was the gentleman who figured out how to commercially manufacture gelatin emulsion dry plates. And in 1888, he introduced the first commercial camera. With this commercial camera, ordinary citizens now had the ability to create images and keep a graphic record of their lives and experiences. Now we're going to talk about the application of photography to printing. Beginning in the late 1840s, the rising employment of wood engravers that started with Thomas Bewick fostered more frequent and effective use of images in editorial and advertising communications. Wood block printing dominated over copperplate printing because wood blocks were not flat like a copperplate print. Many inventors still search for a better process to bring line work to a metal printing plate, and the slow integration of photo engraving cut the cost and time required to produce printing blocks, and you ended up getting a better image. It was first John Calvin Moss in 1871 who developed a process for translating line artwork onto a metal letterpress plate. The process is illustrated here. I'm not concerned that you know that, but that you do understand that this integration of photo engraving cut the cost and time required to produce printing blocks, and you got a better image. Before it was possible to print photographs, photography was used as a research tool in developing wood engraved illustrations. So you need to be able to tell me how was photography used in the early days of mass communications. The reality of photographs help illustrator capture current events. Here's an illustration. Freedman on the Canal Bank in Richmond, the photographer is Matthew Brady, and the woodblock engraver was John McDonald. During the 1860s and 1870s, wood engravings drawn from photographs were prevalent in mass communications. The search for a way to print photographs continued. Many individuals worked on the problem and contributed to the evolution of the process. But on March 4, 1880, the first reproduction of a photograph was published in the New York Daily Graphic, and it was created using half-tone dots. During the 1880s and 1890s, photomechanical reproduction rapidly began to eliminate the highly skilled craftsmen who transferred art from the photograph to the woodblock. Photomechanical production was very quick, so the death of their craft was brought about by the click of a camera. Now let's define this medium of photography, and we're going to start with a couple different photographers. The first is Julia Margaret Cameron, and she received a camera and a processing equipment as a present for her 49th birthday. She was the wife of a high British civil servant, and she extended the artistic potential of photography. So, you need to be able to tell me this. What was Julia Margaret Cameron's contribution to photography? Her portraits have been hailed as a major contribution to images expressing the human condition. This gentleman, F.T. Nader, also made another contribution to photography. And you need to be able to tell me what that was. His photographs of writers, actors, and artists have provided an invaluable historical record. On the left is a portrait of Sarah Bernhardt, and on the right is one of a series of photographs that he made with a very animated French scientist of the day. And in the middle, it's kind of interesting, you see a cartoon made of Nader taking pictures from a hot air balloon. It's kind of funny, but to make a long story short, he basically fell from the balloon and he was dragged for many miles, broke both of his legs, but still the guy did not give up and he continued on with his craft. Now, Matthew Brady provided also a historical record and helped define human history through his photography. You need to tell me, how did Matthew Brady influence not only the art of photography but history through his photographic works? When the Civil War began, Matthew Brady set out with several assistants, including Timothy O'Sullivan, to document every phase of the war. This great national trauma was etched forever in our memories by this collection of photographs. And then lastly, Eadweard Muybridge was commissioned by Leland Stanford of the Central Pacific Railway to document whether or not a trotting horse lifted all 4 feet off the ground simultaneously. So if you look at these series of slides here, you can see right here that a horse does lift all 4 feet off of its ground, or 4 feet off the ground simultaneously. This sequence took 24 cameras facing the sun, and they were equipped with a spring-loaded drop shutter. The shutters were attached to springs, and as the horse galloped, the shutter dropped. Sequence photography proved the ability of graphic images to record time and space relationships. And then I want you to tell me, what do you think was a logical outcome of this development in photography? So in conclusion, upon the arrival of the 20th century, photography was becoming an increasingly important tool in the reproduction of graphic design. Printing and illustration techniques evolved further. Photography became the way to document fact, and this pushed the illustrator toward fantasy and fiction.